The old alchemists used to spend their entire lives just hunched over these boiling cauldrons in dark, smoky rooms, absolutely obsessed with this one seemingly impossible idea.
Right, turning dull, heavy lead into solid gold. The ultimate magic trick.
Yeah, exactly. Physical transmutation,
Yeah.
just changing the very nature of matter. And today we kind of just laugh at it, right?
Mm.
Because we know you can't just wish a chunk of base metal into something precious.
It fundamentally defies physical reality.
Right. But what if those ancient alchemists what if they had the wrong ingredients?
Oh, I see where you're going with
Yeah.
this.
What if the real transmutation wasn't about metals at all? What if it's about taking something completely invisible, like a human thought, and figuring out the exact chemical process to turn that thought into physical wealth?
Now that is a powerful concept.
It is. And today, we are extracting the exact mechanics of that transmutation for you. We're opening up this foundational manual on achievement and wealth accumulation. It was originally published in 1937, and it's derived from the raw, real-world experiences of hundreds of the most highly successful individuals of that era.
And we're going to look at the actual blueprint of how intangible ideas become tangible reality.
Exactly. And more importantly, how you can apply these exact mechanics to your own pursuits today. Whether you're catching up on success philosophies or looking for an actionable edge, this deep dive is for you. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, it's a profound text, but before anything can actually be built, there has to be a starting point. And the source is incredibly emphatic about one thing right out of the gate.
Which is?
Simply wishing for money or wishing for success is completely useless.
Yeah, totally useless.
The baseline requirement is what the author calls a burning desire.
Which, I mean, it sounds a bit like motivational poster territory at first glance, doesn't it? Like, everyone wants to be successful.
True, but the text draws a very sharp mechanical distinction between a preference and an absolute obsession.
Yeah, and it illustrates this with the story of Edwin C. Barnes, which is wild. He literally hopped off a freight train in Orange, New Jersey, looking like an absolute tramp, just dusty and entirely broke.
Completely penniless, yet the text notes that his thoughts were those of a king.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is that Barnes had a highly specific, unyielding goal. He didn't just want a job. He didn't want to work for the great inventor Thomas A. Edison.
Right. He was absolutely determined to work with him as a business partner.
Exactly, which objectively is an absurd goal for a guy who couldn't even afford a basic passenger train ticket.
Totally absurd. But let's look at the mechanics of why that actually worked. Because Barnes didn't just march into Edison's office and demand half the company.
No, he took a job sweeping floors.
Right. He spent months doing the most menial labor imaginable just to be inside the Edison offices, just waiting.
And that is the difference between a wish and a burning desire. A wishing brain looks at floor sweeping and says, this is beneath me, I'm out.
Yeah, I deserve better.
But a brain obsessed with the singular burning desire looks at the broom and says, this is step one of the partnership. Barnes was just biding his time.
And when his moment finally arrived, it came disguised as this clunky, incredibly hard-to-sell machine called the Edison dictating machine, the Ediphone.
Yeah, Edison's own elite sales team hated the thing. They thought it was a complete dud.
But Barnes saw his opening. He pitched Edison to let him sell it, secured a nationwide distribution contract, and eventually became a multimillionaire. The partnership literally became known as Made by Edison and Installed by Barnes.
Wow.
But the insight here isn't just that he worked hard. I mean, a wish is like scattered sunlight, but a burning desire is like putting a magnifying glass over that sunlight until that starts a fire. The text points out that Barnes literally burned his boats.
He left himself no possible avenue of retreat.
None. He had to win or perish.
Exactly. From a psychological standpoint, if you have a safety net, your brain allocates its resources differently. It knows it has a comfortable fallback.
Right, you don't push as hard.
But Barnes forced his brain into a cognitive state where the only two options were success or starvation. He manufactured a life-or-death resource allocation state within his own mind.
Okay, but if you force yourself into that high-stakes, life-or-death cognitive state, what happens when reality inevitably punches you in the face?
Which it always does.
Because burning your boats doesn't magically remove the obstacles in front of you. You're going to hit a wall.
You are, and that is exactly why the text logically transitions into the pairing of desire with extreme persistence. Because without an immense reserve of persistence, that high-stakes desire will just crush you at the very first sign of adversity.
Oh, and the text highlights this with that famous story of Are You Darby's uncle? The guy who caught gold fever went west and actually struck gold.
Yeah, he covered the mine, went back to Maryland to raise money for all the heavy machinery, and shipped it out.
Right. And the first cart of ore proved they had one of the richest mines in Colorado. They were on the verge of generational wealth. Down went the drills, and then
the vein of gold just vanished.
simply vanished. They hit a fault line.
The geological structure of the earth shifted, and the gold was gone. They kept drilling blindly for a while, desperately hoping to pick up the vein again, and finally, they just threw their hands up and quit.
Yeah, they sold all their expensive machinery to a junk man for a few $100s and took the train home in complete defeat.
But the junk man didn't just scrap the machinery.
No. He brought in a mining engineer to look at the site. The engineer calculated the fault lines and realized the gold was still there. It was just 3 feet from where Darby's uncle had stopped drilling.
3 feet! That's incredible.
The junk man pulled millions of dollars out of that mine. Now, the surface level lesson is obviously don't quit. But isn't there a fine line between persistence and just being stubbornly blind to reality?
Absolutely. Stubbornness is what Darby's uncle did at the end, drilling blindly into dirt just because he felt he deserved the gold.
Right.
Intelligent persistence is what the junk man did. He paused, acknowledged his own lack of knowledge, and sought expert counsel. The text asserts that failure is a trickster with a keen sense of irony. It loves to trip people up right when success is just an inch away.
And Darby, who was young and helping his uncle at the time, really absorbed that lesson. He later went into the life insurance business and became one of a tiny fraction of salesmen who sold over $1 million in policies annually.
He built an empire.
Because he refused to accept no from a client. He fundamentally rewired his baseline tolerance for rejection because he always remembered stopping 3 feet from gold.
Darby also learned about the sheer power of persistence from another profound experience on his uncle's farm, what the text calls the 50-cent lesson.
Oh, this story is wild.
Darby watched a little child, the daughter of a tenant farmer, completely master his fierce, bad-tempered uncle. She walked into the mill and just flatly stated her mother needed 50 cents.
And the uncle just yelled at her to leave. But she didn't budge.
He grabbed a barrel stave and marched toward her in a rage.
And instead of running, this little girl just stepped right up to him, looked him dead in the eye, and screamed, "My mammy's got to have that 50 cents!" And the fierce uncle just crumbled.
He dropped the stick, handed over the money, and she walked out.
The audience likely knows this parable.
Yeah.
But let's dissect the invisible dynamic there. Why did the adult man with all the physical and financial power just fold?
Because absolute certainty disrupts traditional power dynamics. The little girl wasn't negotiating. She had an unwavering definiteness of purpose.
Wow, yeah.
When someone operates with that level of absolute unyielding certainty, it bypasses the other person's logical defenses. It creates a psychological paralysis in the opposition because they're encountering a force that simply does not compute in a normal social negotiation.
But to maintain that kind of unwavering certainty in your daily life, you can't just, try hard.
Yeah.
You have to fundamentally rewire your baseline psychology. You have to anchor your physical actions to an internal framework.
Which brings us to the most internal psychological chapters of the text, faith and autosuggestion.
Right.
The author refers to faith as the head chemist of the mind, stating that when you blend faith with a thought, it reaches what he calls infinite intelligence.
Okay, let me stop you right there,
Yeah.
because I have to represent the skeptical listener for a moment here.
Fair enough.
The text uses terms like infinite intelligence,
Yeah.
and it outlines these 6 concrete steps for autosuggestion. Fixing an exact amount of money in your mind, determining what you'll give in return, setting a date, creating a plan, writing it down, and then reading it aloud twice a day while feeling like you already have the money.
Yes, to magnetize the brain.
Right, but a magnetized brain doesn't literally pull physical dollar bills out of the sky. Reading a statement twice a day sounds a bit like trying to trick yourself. How does repeating words actually generate wealth? What is the actual biological mechanism happening here? Because just repeating words in a mirror sounds like a delusion.
That is a crucial pushback, and the text itself actually addresses the flaw in just repeating words. It states explicitly that plain, unemotional words are completely useless.
Okay.
You aren't casting a magic spell. If we connect this to the bigger picture, when the text talks about autosuggestion and magnetizing the brain, it is essentially describing a 1930s understanding of what modern neuroscientists call the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
Oh, the filter in your brain that decides what information gets in.
Exactly. At any given second, your brain is bombarded by millions of pieces of sensory data, conversations, sites, opportunities, risks. If you processed all of it, you would go insane.
Yeah, your brain would just overload.
So your RAS deletes 99% of it and only shows you what it thinks is important to your survival or your current focus. When you write down a highly specific goal, visualize it, and mix it with intense emotion twice a day, you are manually programming your RAS.
You're training it.
You are telling your brain's filter, this specific outcome is now vital to my survival.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
Mm.
So you aren't magically manifesting wealth from the ether. You're literally training your brain to notice the opportunities, the partnerships, and the fault lines that were always there, but that your default mental filter was previously just ignoring.
Precisely. And the subconscious mind makes absolutely no distinction between constructive and destructive thoughts.
Really?
Really. It will manifest poverty just as quickly as wealth if it's driven by fear. If your dominant underlying emotion is fear of poverty, your RAS will beautifully filter your reality to show you all the reasons you will fail, confirming your bias.
Wow.
The text uses Mahatma Gandhi as an example of mastering this on a mass scale.
Oh, right. Because he didn't use money or military force to unite 200 million people against the British Empire.
No, he used the sheer mechanics of faith, absolute, unwavering conviction to prime the collective psychology of an entire nation. He systematically reprogrammed their collective mental filter.
And once your mental filter is successfully reprogrammed, it stops just taking in data and starts outputting the raw material of wealth. The text calls this the workshop of the mind, which is the imagination.
And it meticulously categorizes imagination into two distinct types.
Okay, what are they?
First, there is synthetic imagination. This doesn't create anything out of thin air. It takes old concepts, existing ideas, or established plans, and simply rearranges them into new combinations. Most business innovation actually happens right here.
And the second type?
Second, there is creative imagination, which is the faculty through which sudden hunches or pure inspirations are received, what we might call a flow state today.
Okay, but what is the practical difference for someone trying to build something today? Like, how does this actually play out?
Well, the text illustrates the power of synthetic imagination with the story of the enchanted kettle. An old country doctor walked into a drugstore and sold a young clerk an old brass kettle, a wooden paddle, and a small slip of paper with a secret formula on it for $500, which was the clerk's entire life savings.
Right, the clerk was Asa Candler, and that formula was for Coca-Cola. Now, the physical items, the brass kettle and the wooden paddle, they were essentially junk.
Yes.
The doctor was selling a physical product and thought he got a great deal. Here's where it gets really interesting. Candler wasn't buying a physical product. He added his own synthetic imagination to the formula.
He saw a distribution network marketing a brand.
Exactly. He took an existing medicinal syrup and rearranged the concept into a refreshing global beverage. The physical kettle was practically worthless, but the invisible idea generated billions of dollars.
It proves the text's underlying rule. Invisible ideas are infinitely more valuable than physical goods. Riches are the offspring of thought.
It's exactly what happened with Dr. Frank Gonzalez. He wanted to build a revolutionary college where students could learn by doing, but he needed $1 million. He didn't just sit around wishing he had $1 million.
No, he generated a highly specific, compelling idea.
Right. He decided to get $1 million in 1 week. He preached a sermon outlining exactly what he would do with that money. And a wealthy businessman, Philip D. Armour, walked up after the service and gave him the $1 million within 36 hours.
Gonzalez didn't manifest the money out of thin air. He created a vision so structurally sound and clearly articulated that a man with capital immediately recognized its value and funded it.
But, a brilliant idea created in the imagination is completely useless if you don't know how to actually build it.
Which brings us to the necessity of specialized knowledge and organized planning.
Right. And the text shatters a very common cliche here. It states that the phrase knowledge is power is a complete misconception.
Knowledge is only potential power. It has absolutely no value until it is organized into a definite plan of action and directed toward a specific end.
The insight here is that wealth creation is fundamentally an editing process, not an encyclopedic one. The text uses Henry Ford on the witness stand to prove this.
Yes, the famous libel suit.
A newspaper had libeled Ford, calling him an ignorant pacifist. In court, the opposing lawyers tried to prove he was uneducated by grilling him with all this obscure historical trivia, like how many soldiers the British sent over to America to put down the rebellion, things like that.
And Ford eventually grew tired of the ridiculous questioning. He pointed at the lawyer and said, I have a row of electric push buttons on my desk, and by pushing the right button, I can summon to my aid men who can answer any question I desire.
He demanded to know why he should clutter his own mind with general facts when he had immediate access to experts. General knowledge is like having a warehouse full of random car parts. It looks impressive to visitors, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
While specialized knowledge and organized planning is the assembly line that actually builds the engine and makes the vehicle move,
Perfectly said.
Ford was utilizing what the text famously calls the mastermind alliance. You coordinate the knowledge and effort of two or more people toward a definite purpose. Ford didn't need a warehouse of facts in his head because he had built a decentralized processing network of experts to fill the gaps in his own knowledge.
It's exactly how Charles M. Schwab created the United States Steel Corporation. He didn't just have a vague idea that steel was a good industry. He organized a highly specific plan, gathered the right people, and delivered a 90-minute speech at the University Club in New York.
Just 90 minutes.
Yeah. And that single organized plan convinced J.P. Morgan to consolidate the industry, generating a $600 million profit from thin air.
And the text makes sure to apply this to modern, everyday professionals as well. It mentions Stuart Austin Weir, who completely pivoted his career at age 40, went back to school, and became a highly successful corporate lawyer.
Or the unemployed grocery salesman who realized small merchants desperately needed bookkeeping. He took a specialized accounting course and created a mobile bookkeeping on wheels business in a delivery truck.
They didn't invent new industries. They acquired specialized knowledge and organized it into a practical plan. But plans fail. Even the best mastermind groups launch products that flop or strategies that collapse.
So true.
This raises an important question. How does the text mechanicalize dealing with failure? By enforcing a strict distinction between temporary defeat and permanent failure.
That's huge.
The instruction is clinical. When a plan fails, you must replace it with a new one immediately. If you quit when your first plan fails, you have actively chosen permanent failure.
Right.
If you immediately build a new plan, you are simply processing temporary defeat as feedback. The failure of a plan just means that specific plan wasn't sound. It doesn't mean the goal is impossible.
Now, to direct a mastermind group, to organize these plans and keep people moving through temporary defeats, you really have to step into a role of leadership. And the text spends a significant amount of time detailing a new paradigm of execution and leadership.
It draws a very sharp line between two types of leadership. Leadership by consent and leadership by force. And keep in mind, this was published in the 1930s, watching dictatorships rise globally, yet its application to modern corporate culture is perfect.
The text is adamant that leadership by force, ruling by fear, exploiting workers' dictatorial management, always ultimately fails. History is literally littered with dethroned kings and fired CEOs who tried to rule by force.
Because the attrition rate is too high and fear absolutely destroys the synthetic imagination of the team, people don't innovate when they are terrified.
Exactly. The only enduring leadership is by the consent and sympathy of the followers. And to gain that consent, a leader has to possess very specific attributes. They must be willing to do more than they require of their team. They have to assume full responsibility for the mistakes of their followers.
If a team member fails, the true leader accepts that they failed in their training or their direction.
It also outlines the major causes of failure in leadership. Like a massive one is fearing competition from your own followers. If a manager is terrified their bright young assistant is going to take their job, they will inevitably suppress that assistant's ideas.
Which degrades the entire department's output.
Exactly. Or leaders who emphasize their authority or their title. A real leader doesn't need to demand respect for their title. Their daily conduct commands it organically. And crucially, the great leader claims none of the honors. They give all the credit to the team.
Because they understand the psychological reality that people will often work far harder for genuine recognition and appreciation than they will for money alone.
So what does this all mean? It's a synthesis of human equations, right?
Yeah.
It's mutual cooperation, not dictatorial authority. But what if you aren't in a leadership position yet?
Well, the text points out that the smartest way to learn these mechanics is to be an intelligent follower first. It isn't a disgrace to follow. It is a strategic opportunity to acquire specialized knowledge directly from a mentor and observe the mechanics of leadership from the inside.
You're basically getting paid to learn how the assembly line works.
Exactly. You are positioning yourself within a mastermind before you have the capital to build your own.
Okay, so let's retrace the mechanics of this entire journey for you. It all starts with a burning desire, not a casual preference, but an intense, boat-burning obsession that forces your brain to reallocate resources.
And that desire is sustained by intelligent persistence, realizing that a fault line isn't the end of the gold mine, it's just a reason to pivot.
Then, you fundamentally hack your own subconscious filter using autosuggestion, priming your reticular activating system to see the opportunities around you. Once primed, your imagination begins to output concrete, actionable ideas.
You structure those ideas with specialized knowledge, remembering you don't need to be an encyclopedia if you build a mastermind group of experts.
And finally, you execute those plans through empathetic, cooperative leadership. So, looking at your own life, your current projects, your career trajectory, your goals, ask yourself, which of these specific steps is currently your missing link? Where is the chain breaking? Is it the depth of the desire, the structure of the plan, or your baseline tolerance for temporary defeat?
And to leave you with one final, profound thought derived directly from the text, the author notes that all matter and energy in the universe, from the largest burning star to the microscopic cells in your own body, began as an intangible form of energy.
Wow, yeah.
The text posits that human thought impulses are made of this exact same cosmic material. So if your daily thoughts carry the very same creative mechanics that physically built the universe, what kind of world are you passively building right now with the stray, accidental thoughts you allow to occupy your mind?
From trying to turn base lead into gold in a dark room, to realizing the true alchemy happens entirely between your ears. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep examining your sources and keep exploring.